be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep. These are the words that begin the infamous to be or not to be soliloquy in Act 3 of Shakespeare's Hamlet. And I think most of us can remember, if not the first time we heard them, the first time they were read to us or referenced in a piece of media we consumed. In this video, I would not like to discuss Hamlet's legendary teen angst, but rather how the form in which the text is presented to us informs how we read the text. For this analysis, I'll be using 3 examples. The Stratford Shakespeare Anthology, To Be or Not to Be, A Choosable Path Adventure, and Hamlet, directed by and acted in by Kenneth Branagh. Let us begin with the Stratford Shakespeare Anthology. When I look at this text in this form, the first thing that stood out to me was the fact that this book presents Shakespeare's best works as determined by the editor, removed from the context of their original plays. These are just from plays, not sonnets or other pieces. Instead, these are moments, some of them scenes or soliloquies, presented on their own. And that brings up the question for me in this form, what does that change about the text? Do we lose the meaning of the big questions being asked in this scene, and does it just become a way of praising this as a form, or a praising of this as a great work? Do we lose what it means in the context of the play? And I think that the answer to that question is informed by how each person feels when reading the text in this way. For me, I don't think I lose much because I love Hamlet. I'm a massive nerd for it. That's why I'm wearing pins that have bird skulls because, you know, there's Providence in the fall of a sparrow. But for someone who doesn't have any familiarity with the text, what does this text even mean when it's removed from the context of the rest of the play? The physical form changes the way we consume the text. The small nature of this form of the text also. The Shakespeare anthology is quite physically small. It's about the size to be tucked into someone's jacket pocket. If not worn in our heart's core, then perhaps tucked in our pockets. Does this tell us that it's to be used to harass our friends, to pull out and say, would you like me to read you To Be or Not to Be from Shakespeare's Hamlet? I don't recommend that one, but how the physical text is shaped informs how we use it. This text is obviously originally a play, meant to be performed for a large audience. When we put it in this small textual or print form, does that present it for more intimate moments to be read on one's own or shared with just a few friends? The physical qualities of how the text is presented, the medium in which we consume it, changes our experience of it. My experience of this text is also altered by my own personal memories and connection to this little book. This book was purchased for my mother in England when my family was living there in 1978. When I pick up this book, I don't have the same experience as someone else might. When I pick it up, I think about my mom when she was around 8, reading this little book and what it must have meant to her. Did she read it for fun, or did she just keep it on her shelf? I wonder what it must have been like to read this really dark piece, decontextualized as I've mentioned, and what these big questions meant to her. I have a personal connection to this form of the text, and it changes how I read it. It isn't just a text on its own, and it's different than seeing it on stage. So, as I will present throughout this video, it is essential that we understand the way in which the medium informs how we read this text. Now we turn to the Choose Your Own Adventure story by Ryan North, To Be or Not to Be. It obviously takes its title from the legendary soliloquy, but takes the form of a Choose Your Own Adventure, to be or not to be. It follows all the silly hijinks one could run into in the world of Shakespeare's Hamlet. The reader is allowed to make choices that inform the outcome, playing as either Hamlet, Ophelia, or Claudius. But it also includes portions of the original text. Demarcated with skulls throughout the book are how you could follow the actual plot of Hamlet. And it does in fact include the soliloquy that gives the book its title. When one chooses to be, they are sent to page 10 to read the original soliloquy. The page across from the soliloquy depicts Hamlet standing in a college dorm room with posters that say things such as, "Yay fencing," or a school banner that says, "A school that is in England." This comedic presentation of the text at first seems like a subversion of the rather grim moment of this scene, and perhaps an irreverence for the text. But I think that this presentation of the text really rebels not against the text itself, but how contemporary audiences often perceive it. I think many of us were presented to this text for the first time in maybe an English classroom in high school with maybe a teacher who didn't engage us in the way we would have wanted. This book takes Shakespeare, which sometimes has been presented as something stuffy, and makes it feel current and relevant to the reader's life. Not only is the reader able to see the text in a more comedic and fun way, it also, obviously, by being a choose your own adventure, puts you in the role of Hamlet. And is there anything quite as relatable as this moment in Hamlet where Hamlet is contemplating some of the questions we've all struggled with? What does it mean to be alive when being alive can so often be so painful? This book brings Hamlet back to us. It asks us the questions he's asking himself, and does so in a way that feels fun and relevant. The text's physical design rejects the stuffiness we may have been taught to expect or feel around the topic of Shakespeare, and it's its design that informs us that it's okay to take it lighter or make it appeal to our own lives. I love Kenneth Branagh's adaptation of Hamlet. I know that's a controversial opinion to some, and I don't know if it's Kenneth Branagh's bleach blonde hair or his outfit, which has inspired the one I am wearing today for this video, but I love Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. And I think it's because for me, when I watch Kenneth Branagh perform this scene, it feels really real. The physical form that the text takes is not these words disparate and not connected to emotion, but I feel it as if Kenneth Branagh is contemplating these questions that are being asked in the text. This text, which is often forced onto us to be read, was originally meant to be performed, and so watching a performance of any kind, but in this case the Kenneth Branagh version, allows you to see it not as a physical text, but as an emotional performative one. When Branagh reads this soliloquy, it doesn't just feel like an isolated text like it might have in the Stratford Anthology. It's the furthest thing from that physical presentation because the text is ultimately contextualized in the broader world of Hamlet. As I said, while most people's first encounter with this text might be on paper, its original form is the performance. So what does this form tell us about how it impacts this our reading of the text when we see it in this presentation? I would say it tells us that the best way, at least for me, to consume this text is in its original medium, on stage, or in this case, a film adaptation. When we see someone perform this, we get all the emotion of personally connecting to the character. We see that Hamlet is at the end of his rope, and that's why he's asking these big questions, and it allows once again for us to connect to the text in a way that a textual presentation might not, or might present it to us differently. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of such long life. It's pretty depressing, Hamlet, to think that the only reason that we don't off ourselves is because we're afraid of what happens after we die. But how we view Hamlet's big question, however depressing it might be, is entirely informed by the physical presentation of the text and how we consume it, from the size of the book to the paratextual elements surrounding it. Texts have been presented in a variety of ways across history, from vellum to paper to the digital computer. And we need to be thoughtful of the medium in which we read it. We can't see just through the medium to the text, but but see the medium as informing how we read that text. What I'm suggesting today is that as important as the meaning of the text itself, what we get from this scene, is understanding how the way we consume the text informs how we understand that meaning. So next time you're reading a text, be it Hamlet or maybe a post on Instagram, ask yourself, how does the medium in which I'm reading this inform what I consume from it? Because at the end of the day, as cliche as this might be, that is the question. This is the last test. Hamlet, hand model. Kill me.